So I'm Sarah Harrison. I've been working as a journalist at WikiLeaks since 2010. And so I just wanted to speak to you about the problems that we have had as an organization of people trying to censor us and take us offline, and just generally working in such a secure environment as we need to do publications online. It also, Courage Foundation is a whistleblower support organization for those that don't know that I also work, but WikiLeaks, I suppose, really for the purposes of this. So I just wanted to start with first thinking about what do we actually mean by a free internet. I think it's important when you're looking at finding solutions to issues to really look at what the problem is and what we need to solve. So with a free internet, it's sort of the eternal question at the moment, what is that? Often I think it's easier to approach this by thinking about what we don't want by a free internet, what it doesn't mean. So not by any means is this list exhaustive, but an internet where large corporations can shut down websites or take down content using copyright law or national security rhetoric. This is something we definitely do not want. An internet where people cannot share information without interference by governments and large companies. Internet where people of one country cannot talk to those of another. Internet that could be shut down by an emergency switch. Internet that doesn't allow anonymity. An internet that doesn't allow equal access. And then a big one for me is the chilling effect, which we're getting more and more of at the moment, sadly. An internet where people are afraid to use it because of the repercussions. So, for example, if you are interested in researching around something to maybe tackle an issue, for example, ISIS or terrorism, is the fact that your search is going to be monitored and recorded and then linked to you, is that going to put you on some watch lists when you don't really belong on those at all? It's just that you were researching around the topic. And this chilling effect where people therefore reduce their access or reduce their use of the internet is a very important problem. At the start of the internet, a lot of these things sort of seemed impossible and as though they would never occur. A good quote for this one is from John Gilmore. If we can get it there. He said this to Time magazine in 1993. The net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. To me, this is a very good quote. It's really showing sort of at its core what the internet wants to be and how it has been set up and how it has been designed is so that in and of itself, it shouldn't be censored. It doesn't want to be. It is a decentralized structure that is actually built to resist censorship. So how is it that we have gone from comments like that to, from Julian Assange's book, Cypherpunks, that he wrote with Jacob Appelbaum, Andy, who will be speaking later, and Jeremy Zimmerman from Le Quadrature du Net in France. The internet, our greatest tool of emancipation, has been transformed into the most dangerous facilitator of totalitarianism we have ever seen. And the reason, I think, that we have gone from the first statement to the second in how the internet is really seen and the problems around it at the moment is the governments and corporations, and they're really our adversaries in this fight for a free internet. So a free internet, I would therefore, although I'm not by any means saying it is the definition, there are many, but I would hesitate to say something like a medium to freely and equally be able to share and access information worldwide. And I think that this encapsulates many of the things that are issues of today. So being able to share information freely means anonymously, without surveillance, without being monitored. Worldwide, so across borders, across language, across class, and without censorship. And reasons why it's important. We all need access to information. It's through this that we can actually really grow as people and as societies, get autonomy, understand the world around us. And we have seen this a lot in our work when we've been publishing information and people have been able to access this. There's an example actually from a German citizen, Khaled El-Masri, who, when we had the full archives of Cablegate, when they were published and put online, he was able to find his name in that and start and get standing for a legal case. What had happened to him was that he happens to have the same name as a suspected terrorist. He was on holiday with his family in Moldova, and he was captured by the CIA. He was secretly renditioned. He was taken to Syria, and he was tortured there, even though it was absolutely nothing to do with the person they were really after. And they found this out, and they still took months to actually release him. And he spent a long time trying to get justice for this, but he couldn't get the documentation or any proof that he needed to actually start a legal case. And it was only with his ability to access information online from around the world, across borders, across cultures, that he was actually able to start to try to get justice for himself. And so I think we can really see that these fundamental principles to the internet aren't just nice because we can look at little cats jumping around and jumping in boxes, but they really are fundamental to how we can grow as a just society. So it's really imperative that we protect these rights. I think also another interesting thing is a lot of people, I'm sure, in this room were there when the internet began and understand the sense of freedom and possibility that this had. And it's, I'm sure you will feel, a very different feeling to how we have today, that we feel we're being monitored online. We understand that our companies are taking our data and sharing it with governments. And so I would ask you, what legacy do you want to leave your children and your grandchildren? What internet do you want them to have? Because now is the moment where we have to ensure that it's preserved. And with that, I think that there's some interesting examples of people that had understood what a free internet was and what it meant, and were so shocked when they understood what it was becoming, that they went to extraordinary lengths to try and write that. And of course, I'm speaking of people like Chelsea Manning, Jeremy Hammond, and of course, Edward Snowden. And I don't know, you should all go and watch Laura Poitras's film, but if anyone's seen it, and I'm sorry for the spoil, but he actually says in that exactly this: I remember what it was like, and we really need to get back to that. And I think that anyone that can remember it and wants to get back to that really should be trying to find practical solutions to do that, because it's not going to happen by itself. And we can see that, I think, when we look at the threats to the internet. So they are, of course, mass surveillance. We can see that we now know that the NSA is surveilling all its own citizens and citizens across the world. It's breaking its own laws, international laws. It's breaking our fundamental rights to privacy. And not only is the NSA doing this, but then our governments are not standing up for our rights. And we can look at this, that it's because I think that the problem with the threats to a free internet at the moment is that we really have a concentration of power in what is fundamentally a decentralized structure. So something that was a great opportunity for all is now becoming, because of this concentration of power of who owns key parts of the infrastructure, or who has so much money and so much power to then surveil all, it's becoming into a weapon that's abusing our rights. And that's again when we look at concepts like equal access. And so net neutrality. So that's not just about speed of the internet and that being equal to everyone. There's an interesting phenomenon in many developing countries that's starting. So where they access their internet, people can't pay for computers, they just don't have the money. But they do have a phone, so they're accessing the internet through their phone connection. And there are plans that are being set up for this where, a bit like with, for example, your Sky subscription, you're getting different packages of how much of the internet you can access depending upon how much you pay. And then people that can't afford any access at all, what organizations like Facebook are doing is they're actually creating something called Facebook Zero, which is allowing, even if you don't have any money at all, it's allowing you access to the internet, but only to Facebook. So it's just creating an even larger monopoly of Facebook because they have such a concentration of power and they're able to go and give this free service. There's countless examples of censorship on the internet. So Twitter is being censored in Turkey, Tor in China, and then we have had a lot of examples of censorship against us. So just to give you a few of those, Joe Lieberman, when he was chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security, called for any organization involved with WikiLeaks to immediately terminate its relationship with us. So this was followed by Amazon pulling our servers, an extra-legal banking blockade, which you can see here as soon as Visa and MasterCard cut it off, our ability to get donations went to zero. Every DNS actually pulled us that same week. And this is an example of where the ideals we really feel about in a free internet came into play, because the way we were able to combat this was people around the world set up mirrors. And so we were still able to stay online. And that's an example of the type of solution that the true values of a free internet can create. Sorry. So just quickly, looking at all of those, I hear a lot of talk, those examples, I hear a lot of talk about how the internet is broken, and we need to rewrite all of our laws and we need to fix it entirely. With regards to the actual laws, we have laws that should be protecting this. I'll give you a few examples. If we look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article number 1, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So everybody should have equality. So net neutrality shouldn't be something we're needing to fight for. Those rights exist. It is that our governments are not protecting them. There's a couple of even more apt ones. Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This includes the freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. So we don't need to write in there and online. It's inherent in the way this is written. Through any media, we should be able to receive and impart information regardless of frontiers. So it's there, the laws are there. And similarly, when we look at surveillance, Article 12, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor any attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to protection of the law against such interference or attacks. So when this is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, how the NSA has been able to get away with reading all of our emails is beyond me, and they're not being brought to justice. And for me, this is an important point when there's a lot of buzzwords at the moment and many, many conferences around the world on internet governance, and we're going to talk to politicians and we're going to change the law, and we go governance, governance, governance. And I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be fighting for the protection of our rights, but there is so much money and time being spent on discussions to create laws that we have. And I think that it's very important, and this is where I get to the responsibility of people such as yourselves in this room, where it's quite clear to me that the government doesn't stand up for our rights. I've seen it in publications that we've had in many ways. There's secret renditions, torture, and then when it comes to online, we have those rights. They're being abused, and no one is being held accountable. So I don't think that the solutions are necessarily going to come from just changing those laws, because when you have a large organization like the NSA, whose mentality as an organization is to go and collect everything, then how, just because we change laws that we know they've been breaking already, are they just going to suddenly change? There was one of the most interesting documents to me from the Snowden revelations was one actually from their intranet. And to me, it was interesting because you're really inside the beast then, as it were. You're really seeing their personality. And they're talking about, yes, let's collect it all, let's collect it all. And they even admit they don't even know why or that it will really be of any help to them. But so when you have a large organization with so much money, so much power, and all of the individuals' mentality within it is just to collect everything, they're not caring about the laws, and I just don't see that they're about to care about them suddenly if they change. I also think that there's a problem in that these legal methods can take so long. So one example where there was the right outcome is the EU data retention law. It started in September 2005, sadly during the presidency of my dear country, the United Kingdom. It was adopted in March 2006. It was all about storing citizens' telecommunications data. It got a lot of criticism, but it took a long time for any legal change to actually occur. It wasn't until in 2012 when Digital Rights Ireland were able to bring a case to the Court of Justice at the European Union that they actually won. And that took until 2014. So it took 8 years for a law that was found to be unconstitutional to be gotten rid of through legal avenues. So as much as I agree with speaking to governments, policymakers, and fighting for the protection of our rights, not a change in the laws, but a protection of our rights that already exist, I think that the real answer to this is going to come from the technical community and developers like yourselves. And so we need to understand what solutions we need there. Of course, there's organizations like Tor. So for example, who here runs a Tor relay? One. I think if everyone in this room started a Tor relay, it would take you 10 minutes. It's a very easy solution. It's easy to do. And that's just one clear way in which people can actually start to grow these tools that already exist, as well as developing new ones. I'll get to new ones in a minute. There's organizations as well, I think, that we should be supporting and using that are really living by the values of a free internet. So, for example, CCC, I'm sure many of you know that. Their principles and ethics are those of a free internet. One thing that they do, which is very important, is have Congress each year where a lot of people come together and do talk about solutions as well. And I think collaboration in this is very important. Bitcoin, of course, anonymity, equal access, free exchange across borders. And then publishing organizations that are publishing online, resisting censorship, like WikiLeaks. We have a few ways in which I think that we are living by the ideals of a free internet and really playing those out. So not only are we actually publishing online, we're also creating archives. We made the Public Library of US Diplomacy. That's a search engine, not just for Cablegate, but also for all other United States cables that have been released by the government. They declassify them after 25 years. And what's interesting about this is then you can start to, when you have full archives online, you can start to see, say, a trajectory of someone that is maybe now a politician in 2010. What were they doing 30 years ago? Our search engine, not Google's. And then very specifically in some cases where this was an Australian gag order, we resisted the censorship. It was actually, this gag order was actually saying that they couldn't even talk about a case that was closed to the public, just the fact that it existed. It was a corruption case in Australia by with the Australian Reserve Bank, which we published. So aside from helping organizations that actually already exist. What are the new things we need? So just coming from my perspective as a journalist at WikiLeaks, I think that we need scale. So 10 solutions that serve one person is a lot better than is a lot worse than one solution that serves 100. We need diversity. So, for example, Tor, we need to really get as many Tor relays as possible, so it becomes less easy to target. Jabber, for example, more Jabber servers, so that you're not just relying on a few. And then the main thing, and I know you hear it time and time again, but usability is a hugely important thing. I'm forever helping journalists set up secure communications, and PGP, for example, they just find it impossible to use for so long. It takes so much training. So anything, I know it's really boring to developers, but anything that can be done on helping usability would help us a lot. For example, one example that's topical at the moment, Glenn Greenwald in his book explains that just before publication, when he had to speak to head office, tried to do that in secure means, the only one he could actually get the head office even slightly using was CryptoCat, which was at that very moment a number of vulnerabilities in it were actually being exposed and put online, but he basically had no choice because they just couldn't use anything else. So anything that would take down the training time in it would be hugely important. So very specific things that would be very helpful to us that we can use time and time again. A serverless chat client. The servers become such a target, and the information that would be given out if they're breached means that anything that's not encrypted chat that was not relying on servers would be very helpful to us. Multi-person encrypted chat. When we're working on publications, we do a lot of investigative work and a lot of collaborations. So an easy way in real time for people to be able to collaborate together in a secure fashion would help. And this is where I think collaboration does come in from the tech community as well. For example, there are some solutions to elements of this. So, for example, Text Secure is great, and it could solve some of these issues, but it needs a desktop client. It uses telephone numbers as identifiers. It's not integrated into many other ways. So, if there was more collaboration and someone could take Text Secure and make it so that journalists could use it in the newsroom on their computers, that would be very useful. We basically need an alternative to email, so an asynchronous long-form text communication as opposed to synchronous chat. Ideally, that wouldn't be using servers again in the way email does. End-to-end encrypted by default, and it does not have the encryption protocol as a separate plugin. So again, this is where collaboration would come in, so Pond would be potentially a solution here. It needs a full security audit though. I mean, if when you go to the front page, they even say, don't use this if you need to be secure. And it needs more user interfaces across platforms. And then the last one on my wish list is serverless file sync. BitSync would be a solution to this, but it's closed source. So another solution where files could be passed without them being uploaded to another server, i.e. in the case of Dropbox, so that you're then relying on that company to keep something secure. And of course, for all of these, they should work over Tor by default. So that's just from my point of view a sort of small wish list if anyone is feeling that they actually want to go and try and solve these problems of freedom online and helping organizations to work securely. And as I said, I think one of the biggest things, and it's where conferences like this are important, is collaboration, because there is the start of some solutions out there, or some just need to be made larger, or some need to be improved. So if your next coffee break, you can all have a chat and collaborate and see what you could all do working together. I think that would be very important. And if anyone wants to ask questions now, I'm happy to take questions. No. No questions at all. Yes? Oh, the question is about how do you, correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is about how do you balance the fact that there is a legitimate need to surveil in some instances, for example, the monitoring of a terrorist organization. So when I'm saying that we shouldn't have surveillance online, where's the line between that? Is that what you're saying? I think that the interesting thing that's come out of the Snowden revelations and the way in which he did it was his thinking behind it was that there is no oversight and there are laws being broken, because the surveillance the NSA was doing was mass surveillance to such a huge penetrative level that it was breaking the laws, and the public had no idea about what was going on. So the problem is that these are revelations. And I think that if a society agrees that the police should be able to do targeted surveillance on a terrorist organization, then at least they've made that decision. The problem we have at the moment is there was no oversight, there was no understanding of what was going on, and it was violating all our rights. So I'm not saying that the police should not be able to do their work, but the police there should be oversight by the public to understand what the police are doing, and they should then be living by the laws that are in place. Does that sort of answer the question or not? Clear? Yeah. Yes?
So I would like to run a tour relay, and it's a real struggle finding service providers that will actually allow you to run a tour relay on their infrastructure. So what can we do about that? And also, do we end up with a concentration of risk that there's the handful of service providers that do allow you to run tour relays, but then we end up with all of the tour relays are on their infrastructure. We can't spread it enough across the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good point. That would be a risk, and that would be something that would then that we do need to find a solution to. I think that if as the understanding of the problems of mass surveillance go up, my hope is that organizations, and you can start to see a change in the way some corporations are acting, and they're becoming more ethical and understanding that. Interestingly, I think it was actually a lot through the issue of, rather than them suddenly becoming ethical, it was when they started to lose customers that they actually started to change. I've not heard anyone before finding it that difficult to find a service provider to set up a tour relay. I do appreciate that not everyone will. Maybe that's something we could ask the tour project to do, is to start to find out more service providers that would allow it, and to maybe put that list, or you could contact them for a provider for it. But yeah, I've never heard that anyone has not found anyone before to the point where it stopped them. So I'm sorry that you've had that experience. I'll see what Tor can do about that.
Maybe I can just add on that.
Yeah, because you run one.
Yeah. It's as easy as having a fairly fast internet connection at home and a Raspberry Pi if you want.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you don't need to have a gigabit server running on some backbone. So you have no wrong ISP then?
I have the least bad ISP in Britain.
In Britain. I guess, yeah. All makes sense now. Yes. Well, I think the first step on that is fighting, because we've had this a lot in our work as well, this national security rhetoric that everyone goes, oh my God, I don't want to be blown up tomorrow by a terrorist, so let's do whatever the government says. And we had this, for example, this sort of stuff when we published the Afghan war logs. The US government started saying, oh, you have blood on their hands, blood on your hands, which to me is just extraordinary when you're exposing the deaths at their hands of thousands of people, and then us just for putting the fact that they did this online for the world to read, suddenly they managed to turn this rhetoric. So I think that is a huge problem, but I think that it's possible now. We're building up a number of examples through our publications and then also the NSA publications that show that this just isn't the case. So, for example, I don't know if anybody knows, there was a situation where country X was the Intercept redacted the name of a country whose entire content and metadata was being collected. And the US government sort of spun some rhetoric and put some pressure on them, so they actually had to redact the entire country name. We actually then published the name of that country to great hoo-ha by everyone of, oh no, but they're going to die, people will be awful. And the only thing that happened was the Afghan government was so upset about it was Afghanistan, was so upset about the mass surveillance that they started to look at actually closing down the NSA's bases within their country. So the only thing that it hurt there was the interests of the United States government in that country. So I think they're always going to do it. I don't think the government's about to stop doing it. So I think that the best solution to that is to get a couple of those sorts of examples where, well, it hasn't actually harmed anyone. And then you have those in your arguments when you're speaking to people about mass surveillance. Because there is not one claim that these things have hurt anything other than the interests of the United States government abroad. It hasn't killed anyone. It was the same in the trial of Chelsea Manning. They were absolutely desperate to find someone that had been hurt by her alleged leaking of documents, and even the US government, with all of their time and all of their money and their desperate wish to find it, couldn't find one person. So I agree it's a very difficult issue, but I guess my only answer is that there are now examples, concrete examples you can use as arguments back to those people.
Yeah, so just a not so quick question.
Sure.
So one of the things, getting back to like the Tor relays, I think there's being around when the internet started and having that sense of freedom as a technical person, I think we've still got a lot of the abilities to do that, but I think in recent times it's become much more polarized in that whilst you could say run a Tor relay, now you attract so much more consequence because of that. I mean, there's people who are scared because their ISP might shut them down, or you might get a knock on the door one day demanding to confiscate your hardware. Or I could write an encryption scheme that does the things like you've suggested on your wish list, but there's consequence to doing that. And it seems like we've polarized things where you can either just conform and not, try and change too much or not run a Tor relay, or you're an Edward Snowden or a, Chelsea Manning. I mean, we seem to have lost that middle ground where we can be just a little bit of an activist. And what's your feeling towards that? How do we get that back?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I was sort of talking about at the beginning that I think is almost one of the largest threats in this is this chilling effect where people then become too scared to say or to, as you're saying, to do the things that they would otherwise do. It is a difficult problem. I'm not saying I have all of the answers for it by any means, but I think that certainly the more and more people do it, the harder it becomes to stop them. The US government, I've found in our work, is very intent on making examples of people to try and stop, but they're beginning to fail at it. I mean, they made a huge example of Manning, but Snowden still happened. And there are more and more whistleblowers coming forward. So I think that the only solution to that, and it's not an easy one, but is to get enough people that are courageous enough and willing to do these things, because as soon as there's a critical mass of them, it becomes far more difficult, if not hopefully impossible, for the government to stop it. But I agree, it is a large issue. With things like if you're writing programs, it is possible to, and Bitcoin's obviously a good example of this. If you were to try and do it anonymously, then that's potentially one way you could attempt to protect yourself. Although, as we've just been saying, that is more and more difficult to do online. So, yeah, I suppose the only real answer I have is to resist the chilling effect, unfortunately. Sorry.
So just quickly wanted to say that we promised you there is an app to ask questions. Unfortunately, I can't get internet connection in this room. So if you have posted questions on the app for me to ask, and if you're okay with it, ask them again now, because I can't access them, unfortunately.
Do you get much support from other organizations in doing this? Because you've talked a lot about individuals, but I'm curious about organizations who may have other businesses, but also are activists in their own right. I know, for example, ThoughtWorks, one of the sponsors.
Yeah, I was about to say.
has a big, idea of being activists in these areas, but do they run tour relays? Do you know other companies that do these kind of things, or who support you in this kind of work?
I think there are more and more. I would say a lot of companies that are very supportive are ones that actually have those sorts of ideals, so they tend to be tech companies. So, for example, there's Bahnhof in Sweden has a massive data center that they have in like some old bunker, and they were, in 2010 when we were publishing and we were starting to be attacked, they were one of our providers, and they stuck with us as much as they could. They couldn't obviously stop the banking blockade or things like this. But so within the tech industry, there are more, that I would say, than in other industries, because I suppose they understand what we're doing a lot more, as well as also from a technical side. Other companies that support us. I think a lot of the time it tends to be outside of the tech industry, it tends to be a lot of individuals. And I think that that's probably due to just the way in which we work, because we publish online, it's individuals accessing in a kind of one-on-one basis. So there's a lot of companies that really don't like us because we've published their documents. So it's, yeah, so within the tech industry, a lot of support, and hopefully that just grows and grows. Eric?
So yeah, if there are no more questions, thank you very much again for coming. And if you can, stick around. There's 2 more talks in this track. Thank you.